Under the soft haze of golden dusk, the small coastal town of Rivermus shimmered with secrets it never spoke aloud. Among the winding cobblestone alleys and ivy-clad cafes stood a bookstore called the Velvet Quill, quaint and half-forgotten, much like the girl who worked there. Elara Bennett, with her ink-stained fingers and silent smile, kept to herself, folding her past into the pages of the books she shelved. She wore solitude like an armor until the evening a stranger stepped through the door and whispered her name like a secret only he was allowed to know. Elara, he said, barely audible, like her name wasn't meant for the world, just his lips. She froze. No one called her that anymore. Not like that. He was tall, with dark eyes that seemed to have weathered storms, and a voice like thunder wrapped in velvet. His name was Calum Reed, a man with no hometown, no roots, and a silence deeper than hers. He claimed to be passing through Rivermist, on his way north, but something in the way he lingered made her wonder if that was a lie. And something in the way he looked at her made her bones remember a heat she thought she'd buried long ago. Days bled into nights, and Calum returned to the bookstore again and again, each time asking questions no one else dared to ask. About her past, her mother's sudden death, her father's disappearance, the scar behind her ear, and each time, his eyes held hers like he was trying to memorize something that mattered. And still, he whispered her name like a secret prayer every time like the first. But Elara was not the kind of girl who fell easily. Her world was built on silence, on secrets that could crack the ground beneath her feet. She had made peace with loneliness, wrapped it around herself like a shawl. Calum, on the other hand, had the audacity to try and unravel her with nothing but warmth and questions, and smiles that made her want to remember how to laugh again. One night, as rain pelted the windows and thunder howled across the coast, Calum stood soaked in the doorway, holding a tattered photograph. Her photograph, a version of her she hadn't seen in years, laughing in the arms of someone she didn't recognize. Elara, he said again, eyes filled with an emotion she couldn't name. I need you to remember. You knew me once. You loved me. Her knees went weak. No, she whispered, heart slamming against her ribs. I've never. But before she could finish, he stepped closer and gently touched her cheek, and suddenly her mind spun images of summer nights, of kisses beneath lanterns, of hands brushing against hers like a promise. Images that didn't make sense but felt like home. Her fingers trembled as she clutched the counter for balance. I don't know what game you're playing, she said, barely breathing. I'm not playing, Calum said, voice cracking, with something raw. You forgot. They made you forget. But I came back for you. That night she locked the door behind him, heart cracking open like a wound. But sleep never came. And as dawn painted the sky in muted lavender, she found herself tracing the edges of the photo, wondering why her smile in it looked more real than any she'd worn in years. In the days that followed, she tried to avoid him, tried to convince herself he was delusional, but he didn't give up. He left her letters, old ones, written in a handwriting she almost recognized. He played a song on a guitar outside her window, one she couldn't place but which made her weep. He remembered a version of her she had forgotten, and each memory he offered unraveled the world she had fought to build. Then came the fire. Late one night, smoke curled into the sky as the velvet quill burned flames, devouring every piece of the life Elara had made for herself. But she wasn't inside because Calum had shown up 10 minutes before, breathless and panicked, begging her to leave. Someone was coming for her, he said. Someone who didn't want her to remember. And then the building was gone, just ash and ruin. And all she could do was cling to him as sirens screamed and the past came rushing back in pieces. It turned out Calum hadn't just stumbled into Rivermist. He'd been watching, waiting, for the signs that her memory was starting to return, for the right moment to remind her of the truth. That her name wasn't really Elara, that the fire wasn't the first someone had set to try and erase her, and that the man who'd whispered her name like a secret had once promised to die for her. But before she could ask him everything, before she could even process what she was feeling, Calum vanished. No trace, no goodbye, only a final note left beneath her scorched bedroom floorboard. Don't trust the ones who smile too easily. I'll be watching, and when it's safe, I'll whisper your name again. And just like that, her world shattered and everything she believed about love, memory, and trust burned with it. You said, The days after the fire felt like a fog. Alara couldn't escape. The velvet quill, her one refuge, was now a smoldering skeleton behind police tape. The entire town buzzed with sympathy, but Alara couldn't shake the feeling that the fire hadn't been an accident and that someone very much wanted her past to remain buried. Still, no one could prove arson, and with Calum gone, so were the answers. But his final note haunted her dreams. Don't trust the ones who smile too easily. She wandered through the ashes for days, trying to reconstruct memories she couldn't access. And yet, fragments came without warning: a soft laugh on a pier, fireworks over dark water, Calum's lips pressed to her forehead as he whispered promises. Nothing made sense, but her heart responded to him in a way it never had to anyone else. She wasn't just mourning her store, she was mourning someone she couldn't remember loving and terrified that what they shared was being erased again. It didn't take long for the threats to start. First, a message on her bathroom mirror, written in condensation: "Stop digging." Then her tires slashed. Then a man in a gray coat following her at a distance, disappearing the second she turned to confront him. Alara felt the noose tightening. Whoever they were watching. And without Calum, she had no one to turn to except for the one person she hadn't spoken to in nearly a year, her estranged brother, Mason. Mason lived in a lakeside cabin far from Rivermist. When she arrived, his eyes widened with something between concern and disbelief. "Alara," he said cautiously, as though expecting a ghost. "I thought you were still in the program." She blinked. "What program?" He stiffened. "You really don't remember." The next hours were a blur of revelations that shattered everything. Her name had once been Sira Alwyn, and she'd been part of a covert government memory suppression experiment, one that had gone sideways. She had witnessed something enormous, something they couldn't risk her remembering. So they rewrote her past, implanted a new identity, and dropped her in Rivermist under constant surveillance. Calum, it turned out, hadn't been just a lover. He had been her handler, assigned to keep her safe until it was too late. Only he fell in love with her and tried to get her out. The photograph he had shown her, taken 2 weeks before the incident, her memory hadn't failed. She'd been made to forget. Now, the fire was confirmation that someone knew she was starting to remember, and they wanted her silenced permanently. Mason gave her the only thing he had left from her old life, a hidden journal she had mailed him the night before she entered the program. In it, she detailed everything: code names, encrypted locations, the truth about a biotech operation deep in the woods near Rivermist. She wrote about Calum, about how she wasn't sure who to trust, about how she feared what might happen if she remembered too much too soon. The last entry read, "If I ever forget this, he will bring me back. I just hope he survives long enough to try." Armed with the journal, Alara returned to Rivermist. But everything had changed. People watched her differently. A man in a dark SUV followed her every move. She needed Calum, but he was still gone. Until one rainy evening, the wind howling through the town like a warning, she found herself drawn to the cliffs outside Rivermist. And there, standing on the edge like a ghost, was Calum, soaked, pale, bruised but alive. "I told you I'd be watching," he said softly. She ran to him, slammed her fists into his chest, screamed through tears. "You left me." "I had to," he whispered, catching her wrists. "They were closing in. I had to draw them off." "Who are they?" she sobbed. He pulled her close, eyes dark with fury and regret. "The ones who think they own your memories. The ones who think love is a liability. The ones who know you. Remember something that could collapse them all." That night, he told her everything. About the facility in the woods. About a man named Dr. Vance, who had engineered the memory wipe technology using neurological trauma. About a girl who had stumbled upon classified files, and a boy who loved her too much to let them erase her soul. Alara felt like she was splitting in two, half Alara, half Sira, and every heartbeat threatened to fracture her further. But with Calum, she felt real, whole, alive. The next morning, they made a plan. They'd go back to the woods, find the facility, retrieve the original memory files, blow the whole operation into the light of day. But as they made their way down the forest road, headlights appeared behind them. 2 black SUVs, no license plates. "Run," Calum said, shoving her toward the trees. Gunshots cracked the silence. They fled, dodging through the undergrowth, bullets slamming into trees around them. Caleb led her to an old bunker hidden beneath a hill, one of the places she had scribbled in the journal long ago. There, under flickering lights and the hum of ancient machinery, they found the drive. The one labeled Subject 19, Sierra Alwyn. Full recall archive. Just as Caleb slid it into his jacket, a voice echoed through the chamber. "Step away from the files, Mr. Reed." Dr. Vance stood at the entrance, flanked by two armed men, his eyes glinting with malice. "You really should have let her forget," he said, eyes locking on Alara. "Now, she'll remember everything, even the parts that will destroy her." Alara stepped forward, breath shallow. "I want to remember," she said. Vance smiled. "Then you'd better be ready for the truth, because once you hear it, there's no coming back." Caleb reached for her hand, but before she could respond, the lights cut out, a gun fired, and everything went black. A deafening silence followed the gunshot. Alara's body froze, every nerve screaming for clarity, but her eyes saw nothing in the pitch-dark bunker. A faint hiss of static crackled overhead, the backup generator failing to kick in. She groped blindly through the air, calling out, "Caleb," her voice echoed, frail and terrified, a groan close. Then another gunshot, this one ricocheting off a pipe inches from her head. She dropped to the floor, heart pounding, scrambling toward where she last saw him. Cold fingers closed around her wrist, and for one fleeting second, she thought she was safe until the grip tightened. "It wasn't Caleb. Nice to see the programming didn't erase your instincts," Vance's voice whispered near her ear. Then chaos. A crash, a snarl, a body slamming into another. Alara rolled, crawling across the cement floor. Her fingers landed on something hard metallic, the emergency floodlight. She hit the button. A dim orange glow filled the bunker, flickering across the concrete. Caleb was bleeding, kneeling beside one unconscious guard, his lip split and his left eye swelling. Another guard lay sprawled near the bunker's wall. Vance was gone. Only the echo of his boots retreating into the tunnel remained. "We have to go," Caleb rasped, pulling Alara up. "He's not done." They didn't stop until they reached the highway, her hand clenched around the hard drive like a talisman. They stole an old dirt bike from an abandoned barn and fled through the back roads, finally crashing in a safe house Caleb had prepared long ago, one that smelled of cedar, dust, and desperation. Alara didn't sleep. She couldn't. The drive on the table beside her throbbed in her mind like a time bomb. "I need to see it," she whispered as the sun broke through the curtains. Caleb hesitated. "If you open it, you'll get everything back, every memory, even the ones you locked away yourself, even the pain." She nodded, chest tight. "I'd rather know the truth than live someone else's lie." So they connected the drive to an encrypted laptop. It asked for a biometric scan, her fingerprint. The screen blinked, unlocked. Video logs, scans, psychological files, memory extraction sessions, and then a folder titled Project Silhouette, Sierra Alwyn Confession Tapes. She clicked the first video. A flickering image of herself, bound to a chair, eyes wild, tears streaking her face. Her voice haunting, familiar, filled the room. "They'll come for me. I found the ledger, the offshore accounts, the experiments. Children. Caleb, children. They're using the memory tech to erase witnesses, political dissidents, journalists. I uploaded copies to the dark node, but I don't know if they made it through. I don't even know who to trust anymore." Another tape began. "If I die, they'll make it look like a breakdown, or a disappearance, or worse, they'll rewrite me, bury me somewhere I'll never be found. Caleb, if you see this, don't believe anything they tell you. You said you loved me. You said you'd fight for me. This is me fighting for the truth." Tears streamed down Alara's face as she watched the girl she used to be slowly unravel. So much fire, so much bravery, and so much fear. Caleb sat silently beside her, guilt etched in every line of his face. "You tried to save me," she said softly. "You did save me." He didn't look at her. Not enough. They spent the next days collecting everything, organizing it, preparing to send it to the world. The data had enough evidence to implicate top government officials, biotech CEOs, and shadow departments no one believed existed. But the deeper they dug, the more dangerous it became. The safe house was compromised on the third night. It started with the sound of shattering glass, then smoke grenades through the windows. Caleb threw her under the bed as the door was kicked open. 3 men in tactical gear stormed the room. She heard the thud of fists, a groan, a cry, then silence. When she crawled out, gasping through the smoke, Calum was gone. No blood. No body, just gone. And beside the smashed laptop, a single note in scrawled handwriting. We warned you. Alara ran. For weeks. Changed her name again. Disappeared into cities that never asked questions. But she had backups. She'd uploaded the files to a dead drop server before they came. And every night, she rewatched her confession tapes, trying to summon the strength to release them. On the 40th day, the files went live. Within hours, the world exploded. Headlines. Across every major outlet. Investigations launched. Arrests made. Whistleblowers emerging. The truth didn't set her free, but it set fire to the lie that had been her life. Still, Calum didn't return until a rainy evening months later, in a quiet mountain town where no one knew her name. She heard a knock on her door. She opened it, and there he stood, bruised, tired, alive. I told you, he whispered, voice shaking as he reached for her hand. When it was safe, I'd whisper your name again. But before she could answer, headlights lit up the driveway, multiple vehicles, doors opening, boots hitting the gravel. They weren't safe. Not yet. And just as she turned to run, the world behind them erupted in gunfire, cutting the night in half and leaving the ending unwritten once more. Alara didn't scream. She couldn't. Her instincts, sharpened by weeks on the run and months of shattered memory, locked her body into survival mode. Calum grabbed her hand and yanked her back inside, slamming the door shut just as bullets shattered the porch lantern. The air filled with the thud of footsteps, fast, heavy, methodical. Not amateurs, not mercenaries, government-trained operatives. She could hear it in their rhythm, feel it in her blood. Out the back, Calum shouted, dragging her through the kitchen. But the rear window exploded before they reached it, a gas canister clinking across the tile. White smoke roared into the room. Alara's lungs burned instantly. They didn't make it out. Everything went dark. When she woke, her wrists were zip-tied, her head pounding with a pulse that didn't feel like her own. The room was sterile, bright, metal and concrete. A cell built not to imprison, but to erase. She knew immediately. She was back. Back where it started. Project Silhouette's memory facility. Across from her sat a man with a smile too easy to be real. Dr. Vance. His coat was immaculate. His eyes were dead. Welcome home, Sierra, he said gently. Or do you still think of yourself as Alara? She didn't respond. You've made quite a mess, he continued, glancing at a folder labeled Global Containment Failures Alwyn Leak. Your little information drop exposed a lot, and it cost a lot of powerful people their security. But more troubling than that, you're still alive. She glared at him. That's going to be your last mistake, he chuckled, opening the folder. Bravado. I admire it, but we both know your brain can't survive another full wipe. You're fragmented already. We patch over one more layer, and you won't be Sierra or Alara. You'll be gone. I'd rather be gone than belong to you. Vance's expression didn't change. You always say that, but this time, we have a better solution. A door hissed open behind him, and a woman stepped in. Tall, beautiful, familiar. Alara's heart seized. It was her, a perfect copy, down to the scar behind the ear. Meet subject 19B, Vance said. She's you. Or rather, she will be. Once we finalize the transfer. Alara's breath caught. You cloned me? No, we scanned you, layer by layer. Memory, neural pattern, voice print. And we built someone who will believe she's you but loyal, malleable, clean. She'll go back to the world with your face and finish what you started. But this time, she'll serve the cause. The clone stepped forward, smiling. It's nothing personal, she said in Alara's voice. You just lost your value. Before Alara could reply, alarms began to wail. Explosions shook the floor. Then chaos, gunfire, screams. The lights flickered red. Vance stood sharply. Stay with 19B, he shouted at a nearby guard, then bolted through a side door. The clone turned to Alara. I'm sorry, she said softly. I don't want to hurt you. But Alara didn't care. She used the moment of hesitation to throw herself forward, smashing her shoulder into the clone, sending them both crashing into the floor. The guard lunged forward, but a gunshot split the air and dropped him instantly. Calum, bloodied, limping, but alive. He kicked open the glass wall and dragged Alara to her feet, cutting the zip ties. Didn't I tell you I'd always come back? He rasped. Together, they ran through corridors smeared in smoke and flame, stepping over unconscious guards and shattered servers. They reached the control room, where Calum shoved a data spike into the mainframe. This will purge every subject, file, every clone, every experiment. But once I trigger it, there's no undoing it. Alara didn't hesitate. Do it. He hit the key. The room went white with overload. Screams echoed through the hallways. Back in the cloning room, 19B watched herself dissolve in the mirror code, corrupting her skin like cracks in porcelain. Alara and Calum escaped through an emergency shaft as the facility detonated behind them, flames tearing through decades of lies. 3 weeks later, the world was reeling again. New leaks, photos, files, a confession video from Dr. Vance himself extracted in his final hours and sent anonymously to every major news outlet. The world now knew what Project Silhouette had done, how many lives it had altered, how many voices it had silenced, and Alara Bennett, once Sierra Alwyn, was gone. The world didn't know where, and for once, neither did her enemies. She was reborn, whole, free. She and Calum lived quietly in a coastal town under different names. The past haunted them, yes, but every morning, he whispered her name, her real one, and she knew she was still herself. But one night, as the wind howled across the cliffs, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, a photograph of 19B alive, smiling, and a message, written in Alara's own handwriting. This isn't over. You forgot. I'm still you. Alara dropped the photo, heart pounding. Calum looked up from the table. What is it? She met his eyes, voice like ice. She survived. The shadows thickened outside, and somewhere, the clone walked free, armed with all of Alara's memories and none of her mercy. The weight of the clone's survival pressed against Alara's chest like a buried heartbeat. She stood in the flickering lamplight, the photo trembling between her fingers. It was unmistakable, her own face staring back at her from some undisclosed location. Same eyes, same mouth, same history, but colder, sharper. A version of herself who had been built, not born. And she had signed the note with her hand, her script, her voice. She's out there, Alara whispered. Calum took the photo, jaw tight. Then we find her. We end it, for good this time. But Alara shook her head slowly. No, if she wanted to kill me, she would have done it already. This is something else. A game, a warning, or worse, an invitation. They spent the next week hunting silence, scouring forums, news blips, and encrypted whispers for traces of subject 19B. She had vanished like vapor. No facial matches, no biometric pings. But then a pattern emerged: deaths. Quiet, surgical, efficient. People connected to the project. A senator in DC, accidentally overdosing. A lab technician disappearing during a routine hike. A journalist, dying in a car crash. Brake line mysteriously severed. All names from the data Alara had leaked. Someone was cleaning up the mess she made. She's finishing what we started, Calum murmured as they studied the wall of names. But her way, Alara swallowed hard. She's not erasing the truth. She's erasing the people who created it. Then another message arrived. An envelope slipped beneath their door while they slept. No footprints, no camera footage, just a single phrase written in crimson ink. We share more than memory. We share purpose. Meet me. Coordinates were scribbled beneath it. A time, a place. No signature this time, but it didn't matter. Alara knew. Calum tried to stop her. It's a trap, I know, she said. But you're still going? I have to. If I don't face her, I'll never know how far she's willing to go, or how far I am. The meeting spot was an abandoned church on the outskirts of a ruined industrial district. Midnight, cold wind sweeping through broken stained glass. Alara entered alone, flashlight off, senses sharpened to every breath of air, and then she stepped into the nave and saw herself. Subject 19B stood at the altar like a high priestess of a forgotten faith, dressed in black, hair pulled back tight, eyes glinting like a blade. You came, the clone said, smiling faintly. I knew you would. Alara kept her hands visible. Why reach out? You could have disappeared. I don't want to disappear, 19B said calmly. I want to live. You are living. With my memories. No, 19B replied. With our memories. You gave them to me when you ran from the truth. Alara's spine stiffened. I never ran. Yes, you did. You chose peace. You chose Calum. You chose a quiet life at the edge of the world. But I remember everything you tried to forget. I remember what we swore we'd do. Alara narrowed her eyes. So you're killing them, one by one. They're monsters, the clone said. And monsters don't get second chances. You showed them mercy. I offer them judgment. That's not justice. That's execution. 19B stepped closer. I was built to finish what you couldn't. I am your evolution. Alar's breath hitched. I'm not like you. The clone tilted her head. You're exactly like me. You just haven't admitted it yet. Then she handed Alara a small black box. What is it? Alara asked warily. Everything they never showed you. Files, experiments, videos of the others. The ones who didn't survive the memory wiping. Children, veterans, entire families. I wanted you to see the pain you let walk away when you chose to run. Alara opened the box later that night and it nearly broke her. Faces, screams, crying, children being sedated, mothers begging to remember their sons, whole lives rewritten by cold science and colder men. She vomited into the sink, then sat in silence for hours. Calum eventually touched her shoulder. You can't save them all. No, she whispered, but I can stop this from ever happening again. Alara disappeared again, this time with purpose. She traveled under aliases, spoke at whistleblower forums, leaked new documents anonymously, rallied ethical scientists to testify. Her mission no longer had an endpoint. It was a war of exposure, one fire at a time. But somewhere in the dark, Subject 19B did the same, only her war wasn't about exposure. It was about vengeance, and they never crossed paths again until 2 years later. On the rooftop of a burning research center in Prague, where Alara held the final hard drive and 19B held a gun to a man's head, they locked eyes across the smoke. No words, just the knowledge that the line between them had blurred so much there was no telling who the original truly was anymore. Alara let the man live. 19B vanished, and somewhere deep down, a terrifying truth whispered inside her soul. Maybe the clone wasn't her shadow. Maybe she was Alar's mirror. 6 months later, Alara had become a phantom in the global consciousness. Her name was whispered in underground circles, half legend, half terrorist, depending on who was speaking. Some called her a hero, others called her a mistake. But no one denied her impact. Every time a new secret surfaced, every time another corrupt facility collapsed or whistleblower stepped forward, someone traced it back to the woman who once had no past and now carried the weight of thousands. Calum stayed close, but not always by her side. They had learned the rhythm of separation and reunion, how to disappear together or apart depending on the threat. Their bond had only deepened, sharpened by every escape, every bullet, every moment of silence when they weren't sure they'd survive the next day. He loved her not in spite of her darkness, but because he had touched it, bled for it, and chosen it anyway. But one morning, Alara woke to find a flash drive taped to the underside of their safe house sink. No note, no trace, just a drive and her initials scratched onto it, not by her own hand, but in the style she used before she was rewritten. Inside was a single file, a new video. The screen opened to a hospital room. A man strapped to a gurney, shivering. His name was whispered by a distorted voice. Dr. Aldrich Voss. Alara remembered him, one of the architects of Project Silhouette, rumored dead. And yet, here he was alive and weeping, hooked up to N4 of something dark and foreign. Then the camera turned, and Subject 19B appeared. Her face was unreadable, her voice calm. This is my gift to you, she said, staring into the lens. He designed the neural scaffolding. He perfected the rewrite protocol. He signed the death warrants of 56 children. The video cut to Voss screaming as something was injected into his neck. A serum labeled Echo Fade. He will forget everything, 19B said. Even his name. He will die not knowing who he was. The video ended, and with it, any doubt Alara had about what the clone had become. She wasn't a mirror anymore. She was a weapon. And she had declared herself judge and executioner. Calum tried to console her. You're not responsible for what she does. But Alara shook her head. I made her. Whether I chose to or not, she carries my instincts, my fury. And if I don't stop her now, she'll become everything we swore we were fighting against. So Alara hunted again, not systems, not files, herself. She tracked Subject 19B through the ruins of what used to be hidden labs, down corridors filled with ghost echoes and data scorched by fire. In France, she found a journalist who had met her. In Brazil, she uncovered footage from a surveillance drone 19B blowing up a convoy carrying former Silhouette investors. In Greece, she found a cryptic message painted on a church wall. Justice has no origin. Alara was always a step too late, until she wasn't. A lead in northern Finland, a safe house burned but not entirely destroyed. A notebook left behind, open to a page written in Alara's old shorthand. If you want me to stop, you'll have to kill me. But you won't, because you know I'm just doing what you're afraid to do. There was a GPS coordinate scribbled beneath, and for the first time, Alara knew this wasn't a trap. It was a choice. The coordinates led to a crumbling prison off the coast of Norway. Abandoned, ice-coated, isolated. A final confrontation place too remote for witnesses, too cold for retreat. Alara arrived at dusk, the sea howling like it remembered her sins. Calum wanted to come, but she told him no, this is between me and her. The clone was waiting in the prison's old chapel, firelight licking across her features, casting shadows that made them indistinguishable. You came, 19B said. I always do, Alara answered, stepping into the light. You're here to kill me? I'm here to end this. The clone studied her. We're not enemies, Alara. We're just different outcomes of the same trauma. No, Alara said quietly. You're what I could have become if I stopped believing in mercy. Silence. Then 19B drew a gun and set it gently on the altar. No more hiding, she whispered. If you believe I'm wrong, pull the trigger. Alara walked forward, heart pounding. Her fingers brushed the grip, but she didn't lift it. She met her own eyes. No, she said, because if I kill you, I bury the part of me that still believes in redemption. And I refuse to let them take that too. 19B's jaw tightened, and for the first time, she looked lost. You think I can stop? She asked. I think you want to, Alara said softly. You left the flash drive, the notebook. You've been leading me to you not just so I could stop you, but so I could see you. You're trying to be more than what they made you. Silence stretched between them like glass, and then 19B did something Alara never expected. She stepped forward and whispered, then help me. Alara lowered the gun. Together, they walked out of the chapel, into the storm. No one saw them again for a long time, but months later, across the world, when two corrupt officials disappeared on the same day and a hard drive full of human rights violations appeared in the Guardian's inbox, it wasn't clear which version of Alara had done it. Only that justice was still being delivered, and that someone, somewhere, still whispered her name like a secret in the dark. A year passed. Governments fell. Institutions crumbled. Project Silhouette became more than a scandal, it became a cautionary tale. A ghost story told in encrypted whispers. The world now knew the truth. Memories could be rewritten, people could be erased, and justice could be manufactured. But what the world didn't know, what they could never fully understand, was that the one woman at the heart of it all no longer existed in any singular form. There were two of her now, and they had vanished. Alara and Subject 19B had disappeared into myth. No photos, no sightings, just impact, coordinated leaks, secret trials, black sites exposed and dismantled. But their methods had changed. Alara had taught 19B restraint, and 19B had taught Alara resolve. Together, they had become something. Neither of them could be alone, a force of precision, of mercy and fury held in balance. Justice sharpened by its own reflection. And then, one day, the balance broke. Alara woke to an emergency ping on the encrypted device she hadn't used in 8 months. One word, run. She bolted upright, breath caught in her throat. Calum stirred beside her, but she was already on her feet, weapon in hand, years of instinct overriding sleep. She checked the uplink. It was from 19B, but it wasn't just a warning. It was a file. A full intelligence drop, coordinates, maps, a flight log, a name, a Strauss initiative, and the chilling final note. They found a third. Alara stared at the screen as her mind fractured and reformed around the message. A third? Another subject? Another her? No, she whispered. They wouldn't, but deep down, she knew better. A Strauss initiative was hidden in the Arctic, buried beneath layers of ice, funded by off-the-books defense contracts and corporate giants who wanted to rebuild Silhouette in silence. Their goal, not just to manipulate memory, but to manufacture identity, create agents who believed they were the people they replaced. And now, they had a new creation. Subject 22, another version of Alara, only this time, perfected. No trace of doubt, no fractured loyalties, fully trained, fully programmable. A weapon with her memories but stripped of everything that made her human. She wasn't a clone, she was an overwrite, a person erased and replaced, Alara and 19B met again for the first time in nearly a year at a remote outpost in Iceland. Their eyes met through firelight, and despite everything, they embraced. No words, just pressure, familiarity, a bond deeper than blood. She's worse than either of us, 19B said after a long silence. She believes she's you, but she's been raised by them. Alara's voice was steel. Then we have to bring her back. Or stop her. 19B nodded. We'll try the first, but we both know the second may be the only option. Together, they infiltrated the Strauss facility. It wasn't easy. The tech was more advanced, the security brutal. They moved like shadows, silent, deadly. Every hallway they passed held echoes of memories. Alara didn't know if she'd ever lived manufactured simulations built to anchor Subject 22's identity, to trap her in Alara's past. And then they found her in a training dome, alone, moving through combat drills so flawless it made 19B flinch. She turned as they entered, and Alara saw it immediately, the uncanny perfection. Her gait, her voice, her face, but colder, emptier, like a photo brought to life without the soul behind it. You're not supposed to be here, Subject 22 said calmly. Alara stepped forward. I am you, but you've been lied to. You're an imposter. Subject 22 replied. You abandoned the mission. I'm here to complete it. No, Alara said. You're here to kill whatever's left of me. The battle that followed tore through the facility like a storm. 3 women, 1 soul in fractured forms. Alara fought with memory. 19B fought with vengeance. And Subject 22 fought with programming precision, brutality, speed. It was the most intimate, horrifying war Alara had ever fought because every move 22 made, she could predict. Because they shared the same instincts, the same training, the same pain, but not the same heart. In the end, it was Keelam's voice over the com that shifted everything. Alara, he said, his voice raw. Remember what you told me in the bookstore. The first time I said your name? The words wrapped around her like a tether to the past. She faltered, but only for a second. Enough. She disarmed Subject 22, pinned her, looked into her own eyes, and whispered, You're not my replacement. You're my tragedy. Subject 22 bled from her lip, defiant. Then finish it. Alara hesitated, but 19B stepped forward. I will. The shot was clean, merciful, and when it was done, she turned away. Not out of regret but out of understanding. She was never real. 19B whispered. She was, Alara replied. We all were. They burned the Strauss files, exposed everything, and then disappeared once more. But something had changed. Alara knew there would be no peace, not with how much of her had been copied, manipulated, turned into weapons. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting to ensure that no one else would ever be forced to ask the question. She'd whispered since the beginning, Am I still me? And so the legend grew, of the girl with no past, of the woman with too many, of the whisper that toppled empires and loved only one man in all the world. And wherever injustice bloomed in shadow, someone, somewhere, still whispered her name like a secret only they were meant to hear.